it really belongs to the first two steps of the 7 steps that I've been delineating in my latest videos. Um, the first step would be then to close. Step 2, step back. Step 3, reflect, relax. Um, but the essence of the first two steps is that we are caught in the ego. So I really need to say some things about the ego today. Um, the ego is the false image that we are caught in. The false image you can best understand the false image in terms of that face that we put on when we go out, as it were, the best, putting on your, as it were, your best face, and then you come home and then you take out your ugliest side. What it really is that image that we project towards others. That is basically what you call the false image. And this is a very dangerous thing, because after a while we actually get caught in believing that we are that false image, and that's the way we get caught in the world of illusions, because that image is not reality. It's not the true self. It's the false image. And you get that, for instance, when you can feel that, for instance, when you feel that others are watching you, and then a whole different kind of behavior comes out. What comes out is a role that we project and play, which we are not. And this is basically what Shakespeare meant with we are all actors on a stage. The world is one big stage. And this is very important, because the problem is that we get caught in this role that we play. And this is also not only, as it were, the source of being caught in this world of illusions, but it's also the way we can be manipulated from without, because it's actually a state, that a mental state that we get into, and which has what I would call only comparative value. It's always comparing itself to the outer world. For instance, in the sense that when we're being observed, that's often the what emerges in us, is that this role or this image, false image, that we project towards others. So it's basically a state we're in, where we are locked into what I've often called a mode of reflexology, or a mode where we're always reacting to the external world. And this is basically the basis of being controlled from outside. But it's also the core state we fall into, which detaches us, disconnects us from the true self, who we truly are, which is when we do things from within, from love and from purpose, and not in a comparative sense of what the outcome will be outside the comparative outcome. And this is basically what happened in the Bible when Moses went up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments. The Israelites, in a state of despair, what they did was they melted all their precious objects, and they created this false image, this image of a golden calf. And this was historically, as it were, the stage. This represented the stage that we fell into of the false image, which is the ego, and which is the false image that disconnects us from the true self. And we find also references to this, for instance, in the saying that we were created in God's image. And this is often regarded as something positive, as it were. And deep down, there's of course a great purpose to all of this. But what it really regarded is that the ego is the image of the self, of God, and not the self. And it's as it were a copy of the real thing. And so being caught in the ego is what we would say is being caught in this illusion, this world of illusions, the desert of illusions. And it starts at the very young age, of course, when mother and father starts to tell us that if you're a boy, boys may not cry and girls have to behave in this and this way. And this is basically the stage where these multiple identities are being created, if you wish, or the self is being split. And it is not exactly then that this disconnection takes place from the true self, because then we still have self and we have this plethora of false self images, because you're not the boy or the girl where the man is feminine and masculine and the girl is both. But that's the basis. But then when what really happens is that we tend to then fall into these identities, these splits, these fragments of the self, and then we start to identify with them as being the real self, and then we disconnect from the true self, which is the spiritual being. And we are basically right now in a world that only is based on this false self, this image, these fragments. And there's so much to be said about this, because once we fall into these fragments, we fall into we fall into basically a kind of a binary code, a comparative process of highs and lows, a bipolar process, and which is basically the way we're disconnected from the self, which is not bipolar, and it's infinite. It's not relative. The ego domain is caught in the world of relativity and has no intrinsic value and intrinsic motivation. So the three steps are the first two steps of being too close: step back, reflect. The ego cannot reflect. You see, in all of these beings that basically fell into this stage of the ego, they cannot see themselves. And the first step out of these lower stages, which is so dangerous, because in these reflexology stages, we are completely caught in the lower, denser vibrations. But the first step is to reflect, meaning to start to see ourselves, which is like what the ego doesn't do, because that would basically reveal to the ego, to that false image, that it is concealing a part of himself, herself, and it is false. We refer to people that are false or people that have two faces and are not the same person consistently. So the whole point is that this bipolar identity is split, and the healing is the reflection, meaning that we start to see ourselves. The whole of science is stuck in an unreflexive process. Paradigms cannot reflect on themselves. They can try to explain what is within them, but they cannot reflect. And it's the self-reflection that connects us back to the true self. So when you go to sleep at night, you will see yourself, the state that you are in, and that will reconnect you to the true self, which are the higher vibrations, and which protects us, which is which is actually a kind of a firewall or a shield, and not in a kind of a way that we shun the lower vibrations, because we are here to move everybody forward. But it is very important that we protect ourselves and that we stay away. We try to steer free from the first two steps in the stairway to heaven. But even that even that is relative, because when we fall back, dreams like when you are losing things, or things are being stolen from you, or when someone else is driving your own car, that's when the self is hijacked again and we lose disconnect from the true self. But that is also important in order to become, because when we come back, when we get back onto the third step and the fourth step, which is where we start to connect to the higher vibrations, we become stronger, and then we can truly help others also. I wanted to share that today with you. Just try to steer